Hey guys, it's me, Miss Artisan, here today to talk to you about fossils. We're going to talk about fossils when we're talking about evolution here. So fossils are one of the big pieces of evidence that basically show us that evolution happened on this planet. So you can put together fossils in order and you're like, oh yeah, there we go, evolution right there, it's happened. So this is a good body of evidence to support evolution. You guys, when I was little, I was a nerd. I know that's probably a surprise, but I loved nerdy things like bugs, drawing diagrams of bugs and dinosaurs. And I was so in love with dinosaurs that my grandma made me some curtains of dinosaurs. When I was little, I wanted to be a paleontologist. This is a cool science career that you'll get paid a lot of money and you basically get to travel the world and be outside all the time and looking at bones and trying to figure out how they fit together. And so that's really cool. Although I just said bones, which is wrong, I should have said fossil. I'll tell you why in a second. Okay, this is a cool place that I got to go when I was a little kid. I had found fossils before. You can actually find them outside of Las Cruces at rock quarries. I don't really suggest you go out there anymore because like a whole bunch of people when I went last time were like target practice shooting and like it's canyon. So I was like, whoa, listen to all these gunshots. Let's not die. Let's get out of here. So my friend Marie and I left, but you can go do that. And it's especially good to go after it rains. My neighbor took me one time, and this is when I was little, and you could just find fossils out there on the ground right outside of Las Cruces. There's also some tracks of dinosaurs near Las Cruces that you can go see. So fossils are kind of cool because you can find them a lot of places around the world, and then you get to travel to go to them. So if you want to be outside, you want to make a lot of money, then maybe consider being a paleontologist. But this wall of dinosaur fossils, not bones, is called Dinosaur National Monument. It's in Utah, and I went there once one summer on vacation with my family. And I just was amazed. You could just walk into this building and they just had this wall of fossils. So they basically left it here so that it's like preserved and people can come see it. But of course, another job of paleontologists is to remove those fossils and figure out how they go together. This is probably not just one dinosaur right here. This is the bones or the remains of several different dinosaurs. So they'd have to like literally put it together like a puzzle. So that's a cool job. I would love to have it maybe, but I really want to be a science teacher. Let's define fossils. Fossils are, this is what you should write down, they are preserved remains of organisms in which cells have been replaced by minerals. So these aren't bones anymore, they're rocks now. Minerals are what make up rocks. So this first fossil is an example of a really old fossil, and then this one is more recent. So when we're talking about the age of fossils, this is something else you should write down. It takes at least 10,000 years to form a fossil. Some conditions it takes a lot more than that. And once a rock forms, it's usually going to be there for a really long time until it gets covered in lava or it gets subducted under another plate tectonic. So it's going to be there for a while. So fossils are actually not bones, they're rocks. They used to be bones, they used to be cells. So you can even have like plants that are fossilized, insects that are fossilized, because it's just where slowly over time, as the cell of the organism is like slowly decaying and breaking away, the little minerals go in and they fill in those spaces. So we get a lot of detail because the minerals go in and they fill in exactly the little spaces where the cells were. These are both big things. Like this trilobite right here is probably as big as a frisbee. And this is Homo erectus, which is one of the extinct species of humans that was living. These are pretty big, but you can also find fossils of really tiny things, just single-celled organisms. So that's pretty cool because we get a lot of evidence from the past that basically supports evolution. One of the things I want to say about Homo erectus is this is an extinct species of human. So Homo erectus lived like maybe like a billion years ago. Not a billion years. Hold on, I'll tell you in a second because I'm going to have to look it up now. So Homo erectus has a common ancestor with the chimpanzee. But if you've heard people be like, well, humans didn't come from monkeys, that's true. We had a common ancestor with chimpanzees, and then chimpanzees evolved after while we were also evolving. So that's why there's no like Bigfoot species like in between us walking around, is because all of those are extinct and the chimpanzees are left and we're left. And the bonobos. Bonobos are like chimpanzees, but they have sex a lot more. Okay, let's see. How do we know how to date a rock? Well, here's some counseling from me to you on how to date rocks. If you want to ask them out. Just kidding. Memoria looked at me like I'm stupid. I thought she was watching TV. Okay, this is the easiest way to date a rock. And by date, I mean like figure out how old it is, not ask it out and see if it likes you. But basically, if something is on top of something else, it's usually older. So this one is on top of this one, so this one is younger than this one. This one's at the bottom, so that would be the oldest. These are all different species of trilobites that have existed throughout time. They love putting relative dating questions on standardized tests that use geological layers. So they might show you a picture like this one. This one says, can you solve the rock puzzle? But really on a standardized test, they'd say, look, where would a scientist expect to find the oldest fossils? And then they would have A, B, oh, there's no C, A, B, D, or E. Okay, so they'd ask you that. This isn't so easy, right? Like we know that A is younger than B because B is on the bottom of this whole thing and A is at the top, except for this part where D is. So does that mean that D is younger than A? Okay, this is a little bit more complicated, but this is the kind of thing they put on a standardized test. They do not put this easy peasy one, I'm sorry. There's going to be one on your test and probably one on your activity for this lesson where you need to figure out the layers of the rock. So I'm going to tell you, okay, B is the oldest because it's right here on the bottom of the whole thing. Now we have to figure out if A or D is older. So D goes partly on top of A. So that means D has to be younger than A. What about E? Well, E is splitting D in half. So that would be like a fault line. You know how plate tectonics, things move next to each other or they move under each other, over each other. This is one of those plate lines. This is a fault line. So basically what's happening is it's just shifting. And so it's moving all of this bedrock and just shifting it. So then A would be the second oldest, even though it's kind of at the top of the whole entire thing. D would be the third oldest, and the youngest part would be E because E splits D in half, which means that D had to be here before E happened. So what would we, where would we expect to find the oldest fossils? Would it be B? We'd find the least fossils in D because it's probably some kind of like lava or something that came up, an intrusion, and it's really hard to find fossil, or probably impossible, I don't know. But I don't like to say impossible in science because sometimes it is. If you found a fossil in some melted rock, that would be very interesting. I'm not sure how that would work. The greatest example, the most famous one of relative dating, when we look at these geological layers, remember geo means the earth, so geology is the study of the rocks of the earth, is the Grand Canyon right here. The Grand Canyon has the Colorado River flowing through it. This is in Arizona, and if you've ever flown over it, it's like unbelievably huge. If you ever get to go to it, it's just, I mean, it's magnificent. You need to go. You need to go see it. And so there's all these different layers of rocks that we've dated, partly by what's on top of each other. So this is kind of cool because you can just see it with your naked eye. You don't have to dig to find layers here. You can just see them in your naked eye. If you've ever been driving along to somewhere and you see rock layers in the mountains around you, that is an example of the deposition of different types of rocks. And you can look at the bottom is going to be the oldest, and then up to the top is the youngest. So here, the very oldest rocks here are the Zoroaster granite. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but the one all the way at the bottom. And the youngest stuff is up here at the top. Now, that is a relative way of dating something. So we could say, yeah, it's older or it's younger than the layer that's on top of it. But how do we figure out like the age? Like we know that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, but how did we figure that? Because we can't just keep going in layers. At a certain point, we have the layers of the Earth that are actually melted, right? Molten rocks, they're magma. So we can't date that because it's all melted and mixed together. So we have another way of doing it, and it's called radiometric dating. And we call it absolute dating because we're getting a number instead of just saying, well, it's older or younger than this. No, we're getting a number. And we can do that kind of in a complicated way. The reason I'm calling this slide way of knowing is because a lot of times students feel like, well, if I can't go to outer space and take a picture of the Earth, then how do I know it's there? Like somebody could have made that picture up. Well, if I can't figure out how old a rock is, how do I know how old it is? Like, I don't know how to do radioactive isotope dating. Well, yeah, you don't know how to do radioactive isotope dating. Could you learn it? Yeah, you could, but it would take a lot of time. So we have to trust these scientific experts because they study a really long time in their field to figure these things out. Like, we don't just come up with these things off the top of our head. Scientists have to work really, really hard so that they can show that their statement they're making, their claim, has a lot of evidence behind it. So this is a really simplified version of radiometric dating. You can use carbon for younger things. So like if you were dating bones instead of rocks, you could use carbon dating. But we use other elements for things like rocks. And this rock right here is the Canyon Diablo meteorite. There's more than one meteorite in there, but this one is, I think, from Meteor Crater, Arizona, which is another cool place in Arizona you could go. And it's mostly made of iron, but it's this big hunk here of rock, and we used it to figure out how old the Earth is. How do we do that? Well, okay, there's this weird thing, um, and it's really weird. It doesn't make any sense, and we don't even really know why it happens. We can just observe it. And sometimes one element, if it's unstable, it'll turn into other elements. So these are representing two elements here. The U is representing uranium, and uranium in certain isotopes is unstable. So basically, there's too much happening in the nucleus for it to stay together. And so it'll split up. We call that fusion. I mean fission. Sorry, fusion is when they come together. Fission is when they break apart. Well, we know that about every billion years, okay, there's going to be half of the uranium has broken apart, and it breaks apart into two things. One of those things is lead, and that's what these blue circles are representing. So if we get a sample of a rock and we count the amount of lead and the amount of uranium, we can tell by how much uranium has turned into lead how old that rock is, because it takes a billion years for half of it to change. Then it takes another billion years for another half of the leftover uranium to change. And then it takes another billion years. The Earth is only 4.5 billion years, so this is an excellent way to go back dating because it gives us enough billions of years to work with to figure out like, well, how old is this stuff? So when we combine the absolute dating and the relative dating, we can figure out really well how old fossils are and which ones are older than which, and piece together a story of life on Earth. With a lot of this information, geologists have built what's called the geological time scale, or geologic time. Geologic time is the whole history of the Earth. So geo means the Earth. Logical is like ology, a study of. So this is the time of the Earth, the whole entire Earth's history. The Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. And the first part of it was too harsh, too nasty, too gross to support life. So there weren't any cells, there wasn't anything. Science can't answer the question where the first cell came from, but we can answer what the first cell was like. And so the very first kinds of life on this Earth, and for billions of years, we only had these single-celled organisms that were archaea bacteria or bacteria. You've heard bacteria before. Archaeobacteria is just kind of like bacteria, but a little bit different. Then we go and we start getting more and more complicated things. We start getting plants and funguses. We start getting animals. And we finally get to modern humans. Modern humans, there's some debate over how old we are. I like to use the number 200,000 years, because that's what I find a lot of times. It's like an average of what I find, and we keep finding new evidence. So as we find new evidence, we'll probably flesh it out a little bit better. But humans haven't even been around for 1 billion years. We're like super new creatures on this planet. And a lot of these things are extinct, but a lot of them still look like things we have today. For example, the trilobites look like modern day horseshoe crabs. We still have corals. We still have squids. Okay. We have conifer trees. We have bugs. And so we know that the things that are here now are related to the things of the past. But for some reason, these things of the past died. There's a lot of different reasons they die or go extinct. So what can fossils teach us? Like why does all of this fossil evidence support evolution? Well, we connect the past and the present. So my favorite animal when I was a little kid was an alligator. I was very excited about alligators. I had a little alligator that my grandparents bought me at the zoo, and then I was like obsessed with it, and I was like, alligators are so cool. So there's a difference between alligators and crocodiles, and you can kind of see some of those morphological difference. Morphology just means like the way that they're shaped. So the alligator has like a wider head, wider jaw, and then it also has teeth coming down from the top. And a crocodile has a skinnier snout, so it's skinnier over here, and then it has teeth coming up from the bottom as well as down from the top. And the major difference is that alligators can't live, for the most part, in salt water, but crocodiles can. They can live in salt water. So this is an example of an extinct marine type of alligator, crocodilian. Okay, so this one is definitely extinct now. We can find bones of it, but it looks a lot like our alligators and our crocodiles of modern times. So it shows us that what is dead is related to what are currently alive. Okay, when we piece together all of these things, we can get what's called the phylogenetic tree of life. This is a picture, it's a graph that represents everything that's alive on Earth today. So it doesn't show us the things that are extinct, just what's alive today. And there are 3 main groups: bacteria, archaea, and eukaryota, or eukarya is how we usually say it. And right back down here at the very base, the trunk of this tree, is something called the common ancestor. The common ancestor was related to every organism that's alive today. We don't know how the common ancestor got to Earth. Aliens could have dropped it off. God could have made it. It could have come on a meteorite and it was totally an accident, but we don't know where it came from. We just know that it was a single-celled organism. It was probably in the kingdom Archaea. It lived in the water and it had DNA, and now everything has like some of its genes basically. So we have in our body, we have a connection to that common ancestor, and so does every other living thing. Back to Charles Darwin for a second. This is some of his field notes. I actually have a shirt that has this on it because I'm a nerd, and it says, I think. And basically, Darwin drew the phylogenetic tree of life right here. So this was like his idea. He doesn't really have very many specifics here, but he was like, I think this is how it works. If you go back in time far enough, you're going to find one thing that everything else is related to, and that thing is the common ancestor. Okay, these are some more trees of life that are just more complicated. I picked the other one because like these are a little too complicated if you want to just get a basic understanding. But you can see most life, so here's animals right here. Here's plants right here. And most of the things that live on this planet are not things that we can see with our naked eye. We need a microscope to see them. But we always think about just animals and plants because that's what we interact with. That's on our scale. Things that are too small for that, we don't really like ever interact with unless you got a microscope. Okay, there's on this tree of life thing, we're going to do a little bit of phylogeny, which is looking at these trees of life, and cladograms in part 2 of this fossils assignment. So I just wanted to note that. I'm going to talk more about this, but this is where you can come back to get a little information on the background of those if you need it. Okay, we can also find out that evolution, it shows us the adaptations that different organisms made over time. So this this diagram, this piece of land right here that's like all the continents smushed together, except North America isn't shown on here. I don't know why I was looking for one that was, but it's not shown on any of them that are this simplified, so I just picked this one anyway. You can find that fossils are deposited in this area, showing that South America and Africa were once together. But if you look at the modern organisms that live there, okay, right here, this is the more southern part of Africa. Right here, we've got some tropical rainforest in Africa, but right here, we're getting to some more deserty places. So South America, right here, has a rainforest. So we have different organisms living here, but they have a common ancestor. Well, how does that show that evolution is happening? Well, over time, this thing that had a common ancestor now has a descendant in South America that looks very different than its descendant in Africa. And that's because this became a desert and this became a tropical rainforest. And so you have to have different adaptations, different fitness, different types of fitness will help you live in those different places. So it's just showing you like this is actually pretty lined up across all the continents, but like I said, they don't have North America right here for some reason. Okay, it can also show us how long this takes, because if we know that Pangaea had all the continents together, and that was how many billions of years ago, how many millions of years ago, then as we spread apart, we can get some references for time in evolution. So this time scale of evolution. All right, that is all I have to say about that. I'm sorry this video is 20 minutes long.